did performances in various spots. So
the world needs more clowns.
yes, absolutely. Well, memories of childhood, World War II, Duncan, Oklahoma. I was born March 30th, 1940. Daddy had been drafted into the Navy, but never served because he was seconded to work with Soviet geologists helping them drill for oil. A colored maid named Arilla helped my mother. She was very superstitious and eventually ran away with a preacher whose face she saw in a burning bush.
Wow.
Well, at least that's good matchmaking anyway.
The preacher at our church was so loud that he often woke up the children in the nursery. That was me. When I was 3, Mother took me on the train to Houston to stay with my grandmother while she gave birth to my brother. On the way back to Duncan, our train got caught in a flood. My next door neighbor's name was Miss Boo. She was just the right age for a playmate. My brother was too little to be much fun. To be continued.
Well, so you stayed on the train. She gave birth to your brother?
No, that I need to.
I was going to say that. The grandmother did, yeah.
No, that's what on the way back.
Yeah, her grandmother.
After my brother was born, on the way back on the train, there was a huge flood and the train got stopped. We were stopped for maybe 10 hours until the water went down.
You're going to have to do something with the wording of the 4th stanza, because it says that your grandmother gave birth to your brother.
No,
But
dear.
it's written there.
Right, that's
Oh,
right.
true.
Maybe she did.
Oh, sorry, I didn't notice that.
Thank heaven she didn't run off with the preacher with the burning bush. That's the one that scares me.
She did. She came at night and said she was leaving because she saw the hand in the burning bush. So,
Fun.
What had you been drinking?
I don't know. I never heard of her.
Moses juice.
Well, I can't wait to see chapter 2. I see this is chapter 1, so we have more to look forward to.
Yes, I will revise this.
Did you say capture one?
Chapter.
Chapter.
Chapter 1. I might have said that, but I didn't need to.
It's like on the WUB, when they talk about that they're streaming on something or the other, I always hear screaming. We are screaming on whatever.
Yeah.
I was, last week, we had said that we hadn't had a poet other than from the group to discuss. So I took it upon myself to bring in a poem from Thomas Merton, which I would like to add to our discussion.
Excellent.
Thomas Merton was a Trappist monk for 27 years in the Abbey at Gethsemane in Kentucky. He was born in France in 1915 and died in Thailand, supposedly of an electric shock, electrocuted when he was in the bathtub and trying to change a bulb or something like that.
Dumb thing to do.
Pardon me?
Dumb thing to do.
Yeah.
I hope you learned his lesson.
He was a mystic. He's one of my heroes. He's a mystic, and probably did more during those years to study the Eastern religions, and he was able to bring in a great deal of Buddhism and Hinduism and Taoism. He worked with Thich Nhat Hanh, if you know him, and E.T. Suzuki and the Dalai Lama. He worked with all of these various people, and wrote 70 books, believe it or not, 11 of which are books of poetry, and he also had one novel. So most of his stuff is about Buddhism, mysticism, and social justice. So I was particularly drawn to this poem, which is called When in the Soul of the Serene Disciple. which I would like to read. When in the soul of the serene disciple, with no more fathers to imitate, poverty is a success. It is a small thing to say the roof is gone. He has not even a house. Stars as well as friends are angry with the noble ruin. Saints depart in several directions. Be still. There is no longer any need of comment. It was a lucky wind that blew away his halo with his cares, a lucky sea that drowned his reputation. Here you will find neither a proverb nor a memorandum. There are no ways, no methods to admire where poverty is no achievement. His God lives in his emptiness like an affliction. What choice remains? Well, to be ordinary is not a choice. It is the usual freedom of men without visions. This was also highlighted in another book that I am reading about, it's called Falling Upward, and it's by Richard Rohr, who talks about the second half of life and just kind of getting rid of all of the crap that we have accumulated over the years and letting just ourselves be there in the end. So it's really kind of touched me, so I wanted to bring it in.
Reading that same book.
Fun.
Thank you. My poem is called Death by Light. Flickers of light pierce the anguished dimness of my room, seemingly anxious to escape the box that has set a trap for all who enter its meaningless domain. Flickers that find their reflection in glassy orbs transfixed, ones that sink deeply into a mindless skull, resting precariously atop a body, affixed to a chair positioned strategically in empty space. Flickers of electrons, all struggling to reach a brain long since dead from its own hunger for the truth, for the wisdom that resides solely in the silent darkness, which the light has managed so well to hide.
That's so cheery, that's so cheery. It's all enough with suicide.
It's related to
Merton,
Merton's
yeah.
poem.
Yeah, I mean,
It to me.
I wrote this as I was watching someone sit in front of a computer, just kind of transfixed by this screen of light, and all of the people who are fixed into the light. I brought in my own.
The problem with this Merton poem is that we can't say much about it because it says, be still.
Right.
There's no longer any need of
No
comment.
comments.
Just drawn into this box for what? I wondered. So I just said, why don't they stop and look around?
Yeah.
It's like people working the slot machines in Vegas.
Yep.
Yeah, and they don't even do.
It's the same
Right,
thing.
yeah.
They're
Push the
just,
button.
where are they?
You're
It's
right.
not- I think that's the best example of the worst consciousness on the face of the earth.
No, dog
Great.
fighting's the worst. Dog fighting's
It's
the
really
worst.
compact.
Mhm.
Your wording is really
Tense.
everything. Yeah, exactly. There's a bleakness running through your poetry. I gotta say it.
He said himself quite well.
What's going on?
I have a question though
Sure.
about the way your lines break in the third stanza, because you had trouble reading it,
Right.
because you ran out of breath before you
Right.
got to the
That's
end
true.
of, got to the comma, and I just wonder about just jiggling the words around a little bit.
Okay.
And I think if one is reading it to oneself, the breath problem isn't a problem,
Mhm.
but it just seems that there's something wrong with
Thank you.
where the pauses are.
Thank you. Keep that in mind. Great.
On the other hand, you may love it the way it's written.
More times.
Yeah,
I need to keep
sometimes
reading this.
it's good to leave the line
Because every time you read it, it'll.
vague, so it could go
resonate
anywhere,
Yeah.
and then the next line pulls it back. So, I don't-
Yeah, that is nice.
I think it's when pulling out of the garage, and the next day, it is 30 degrees cooler with a breeze. On Route 33 southeast bound, a washboard effect rises and descends on some of the newer parts of this well-traveled path. The roadside vegetation now shows a maturing summer slipping into fall. A well-worn, iconic two-story brick building, the top of the Flint, has its roots close to the Delaware-Franklin County line. The second floor houses a bar where there is no last call for alcohol. A vision comes to mind of someone descending down tiny metal steps at 3 a.m. On mile marker 49, eastbound on Route 161, between New Albany and Granville, sits a hawk drying his feathers from the recent rain. Last night at a restaurant, you overheard someone say, "Well, my dear, if you are over 55, you are a crone." So you go home and look in the mirror because you passed that 10 plus 2 years ago. And you remember the night you hung on the railing at 3 a.m. at the top of the Flint. Some days are like that. The seasons, weather, road, and life's changes play their game. And while an old building seems to remain the same, I wonder just what the hawk story is.
That is cool.
Yeah.
In your
Thinking
fourth
one's
stanza,
way
you
through
meant
one's
to
travels.
try to not dye the feathers, but dry
Dry.
them.
Oh.
Yeah, I marked
Misspelling.
that.
I thought it was cool.
Fourth
Dying.
stanza. Dyeing the feathers, that's not bad.
Who's gonna make a purple wig?
Just the spelling.
I love watching the buzzards dry their wings either in trees or on the top of the convo.
Oh, yeah.
Where they hang out like that, and it's something very, very, very baleful.
I love the vision of the 3 a.m.
Yes.
bar.
This
that
is a real
has
place,
no
by the way.
last call.
Those tiny steps.
Is it still open?
Yeah, it's become a popular bar for
Yeah.
golfers.
Where is it?
Golfers at 3 a.m.?
It's near the Franklin, Delaware County.
The word down, because you have descending. which
Oh,
means
okay, yeah.
Down.
Yeah.
Makes sense too. Thank you.
I like that. I wondered just what the hawk story is.
Yeah, that's a
I did
great
it.
last line.
Okay, thank you.
We're gonna follow you sometimes.
Women can be curmudgeons. I think that's absolutely unfair, and we should speak up for that.
Well, I think to be a crone is a venerable title.
But I
And
think
you have to be worthy of that.
Yeah, you need a few
I'm not
more
sure I was
years
worthy
on
at
you than
55.
just 40 of them.
You know?
We got a lot of nice stuff going on.
We're extras.
Interesting.
You got out of your chair, didn't you?
Eventually. Yeah, I was just. Night River. Past midnight, our brave boat hugs the shore of the Ohio. We are drawn to just one magic sweep, unable to fathom dark and deep. Our lone presence, a Dixie cup lamp, stands at the stern and up at the bow, a pocket-sized torch of red and green. We know the path of the barges well, hushed giants that press through the night. But we belong to the dark river more than ever we could in the light. We glide under the arching bridge of the Muskingum, feeling clean chill as we pass the docks, alabaster thrones, the sleeping yachts. Imbued with the rite of peaceful rest, the no-wake signs are new and fresh. We tiptoe by in our 14-foot of 40-year fiberglass vintage. With our rusty old steel-red gas cans, we can run all day till nightfall. Rich folks sit on their decks, that's all. Out and away from the tribe of yachts, festive camps, colored lights that shoot out long, reflecting the languid current song. Along the edges, no one's awake, only the chugging our motor makes. A half moon and a handful of stars emerge bright from a shadow of mist. We give the boat gas and open up to fracture the liquid mirror flares and say goodnight to a tinsel dance. The river folds us into its spell, an inky silence, indolence, mindless of mission. Did we pass the dock sign by again? Is that the fisherman's little lamp? We squint and see his spider-thin line arching between the water and sky, shrinking below to save his catch. We stretch out our arms to grasp the cleats and tether the prized, gallant blue boat that dreamed its way back home.
Nice.
Where does that cast a spell?
You can nod
It's my
one night.
favorite thing in the whole world.
And see
To
that.
What
be out
kind of a boat?
in the black, it's a little 14-foot 1974. Not,
That's not so little, that's bigger than.
we're like the tiniest boat on the Ohio most of the time, especially when it's rough.
Must be fun
Weather,
getting the
but-
wake up the big barges.
Yeah, that's the
Boing,
thing. I
boing.
mean, there, it's just.
It'll swamp it, wouldn't
We
it?
had motor problems this summer, and we just had to be out of the barge lane all the time because it was just like, I mean, you can't get out of their way. And it's just so amazing, the silence of this vast wall coming at you. It's just.
I love the way you, and this is a beautiful, beautiful poem, and I love the way you are able to take a very simple thing and make it just so present to us, make it so, you know, I feel like I'm there with you. I mean, it's just an incredible use of words.
It's just,
I mean, it's clear that you obviously love this, so and it comes through.
Thanks. It is an amazing thing to just go from Marietta down to this place that we, it's called the Magnuson. It's a kind of crummy hotel, but it's on the-
Magnuson's?
Yeah, that's the name of it. It was Best
MUI?
Western.
MUI? SANCE?
It's Magnuson, MAG. NUS, what do you
Well, is it, you're saying nuisance? It's a nuisance?
Oh, not a nuisance, it's a kind of a tacky place, but it's on the, it has a dock.
I'm
on the-
sorry.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it has a
That's cute. I
dock
thought that-
on the water. So, and we do tend to stay up really late, and then we come down the road from Marietta, and it's just, almost nobody's out, and it's just the lights and the darkness of it. It's just, you know, the sound of the water. It's just an awesome thing.
Well, your sentiment is
Come with
translated
us.
into
Or you
your-
can cram in, that's a little bit.
into your words, you know, and it's one of the reasons that poems really ought to be read aloud.
Correct.
And you are the reader of it.
Correct.
And I don't know if just the words on the page would have the enchantment that your presentation did.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's a package. It's great.
There's some beautiful descriptors in here, like the sleeping yachts and the languid current, the liquid mirror. I mean, it's, you know, it really is
Inky
an
silence.
incredible use of words here.
Yeah. It's one of the reasons that I get a lot more out of hearing the poems of the persons in this group than all the reading of poems that I'm inclined to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's personal.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you were talking about light and dark. She has a line that we belong to the dark river
Exactly.
more than ever we could belong.
Picked up on that also. There is a kind of peacefulness in the darkness. I've learned to understand the darkness as very, you know, we don't always have to have light all the time. It's something somber and peaceful about the darkness. And you captured that here too, with your Dixie cup lamp.
It is just like that. It's a little
Yeah.
thing like this. Hopefully working.
Great.
Extra.
Someday I'll show you my poem about traveling up with on the Delta Queen.
Oh, I love to hear any stories about water.
The other thing
rivers.
about it, I didn't keep going on there, but it's, when I used to have a sailboat when I was a kid, and it was just to go out on the water and to feel just the breeze carrying me. It was really incredible. And then these motorboats, you know, and it's like,
They're so
how
vulgar.
could somebody go out in a boat just to hear an engine going on?
It's
Groaning.
Awful.
the
It's
same way with
awful.
the people with the ATVs that go out into the forest and people are hiking along, enjoying the quiet, and this monster roars past them.
Oh, yeah, the cigar boats. Vroom. Oh.
Or before people who are always on cell phones when they're walking on campus, or driving too. People don't appreciate silence
Right.
and your internal
It's hard
dialogue.
to find it.
Yeah, I think they're afraid of their inner thoughts.
When we were living in the tranquil Keys, as the years went on, more and more of the jet skis would show up on weekends, you know, and in this placid and quiet surround, they would get out there and they just go around. It's maddening. And cigarette boats too.
Our boat is so little, and the wake can be so big. I mean, if we're docked at a,
Oh, yeah.
at a dock, you know, and the vroom, we're vroom like this. It's just, and no one ever stops. I mean, they just vroom right by.
Yeah, and that's the problem with these people who roar around, because just recently there was a girl from, I think she was an Australian, who had been water skiing and she fell off her skis. And the boat towing her was circling around to pick her up, and some other boat came roaring right over the top of her and killed her. And, you know, it's just, I forget what they're, I think.
Wendell Berry has
Ohio
written a
or
couple of
something.
good poems on life on the river and
Yes.
the boating going by.
I think of Wind in the Willows too. Write his love for the river.
Went with my 12-year-old granddaughter and to my place where I was born and raised. So,
To buy it.
so this is essentially a prose poem again that tells the story of going home again, going south again. An old diaspora-dwelling New Orleans native returns on Delta Airlines to his Mississippi coastal wetlands home. Moisant Airport has been renamed for Louis Armstrong, the trumpet genius once shunned in the whites-only past. I am here with my granddaughter for a family birthday. Our first impression is the oven-like 106-degree heat. We yo-yo between exteriors too hot and interiors too cold. Soon, a miasma of childhood memories intoxicates me. First stop is a highly regarded seafood shack in Bucktown, sheltered behind a recently failed levee on Lake Pontchartrain. A new floodgate and massive pumps now pretend to protect it. Everywhere we go, the ugly wounds of Katrina are still apparent. With a murder a day, post-flood New Orleans is a dangerous place. So after a World War II museum visit and a famous Plum Street snowball, we leave the Crescent City and cross the Lake Pontchartrain Causeway into the North Shore communities of Mandeville and Covington. I reread a Walker Percy novel to get into a Feliciana Parish mood. He is buried under a live oak tree at nearby St. Joseph Abbey. We revisit the church and his gravesite before checking into the Walker Percy suite at the boutique Southern Hotel in Covington. Our family birthday celebration is a grand success, and we revel in the festive company of family and friends. We feast together often with great gastronomic gusto. Charbroiled oysters, soft-shelled crab, blackened red fish, crawfish, bisque, red beans and rice, and oyster po' boys. Feeling at home again brings joy, and I am a very happy man. But in a sense, home is a fantasy, an illusion, a psychic mirage. In going home again, one also confronts a painful existential angst. The home recalled may have changed, or perhaps no longer exists. Worse still, despite false memories, it may never have existed at all. Some of this was inspired by Walker Percy, who's one of my favorite novels. So I have one of these books here, so you get a sense of what he looks like. I'll pass it around. A very profound philosophical writer who lived in Covington, where I was, and I often go to see his gravesite because it's at one of my favorite spots in pine forests of Louisiana.
Which one did you reread?
I reread the one that's right there, the Thanatos Syndrome, and but I know the moviegoer, and he's written nine books.
I've got a couple of them on my shelf.
He's quite profound.
Very good.
Yeah. And what I like about him is that he raises existential questions of what is real and what is not real. And I began to think about this in Walker Percy terms of, for example, the Louisiana that I remember and love and grew up in really no longer exists. And it maybe never did in a philosophic sense. Think of Louisiana. What do you think of? Do you see the shape of Louisiana in your mind's eye? It's a L shape like Louisiana, and it has a boot. But it no longer has a boot. The wetlands have been eroding so rapidly, a football field every day, then something the size of some of our smaller states is gone. If you drew a proper map of Louisiana today, it would have no boot. And you can't walk on most of that area around New Orleans. It's marshland, and it's one of the reasons Katrina was so devastating. So it raises a question of what's real and what was and what is, and the ancient Thomas Wolfe question, can you go home again?
Well, it's a rotten country going ever more rotten at an ever increasing pace, I think is what we have.
How did you?
Well, look around. What is not rotten? What is not broken?
Yeah.
You know, and environmentalists, I formerly was one, you know, did our best.
Get back to your point.
Yeah.
On the last stanza of the first page, second line, you read, "He is buried under a live oak." Do you want under or beneath?
Yeah, under is better.
Okay.
I like my BBs there, but under fits better. It really is
Felix.
under a live oak tree with a 150 canopy. These are such glorious trees.
But dendrology. According to dendrology, wasn't he been planted over him once he was buried? You can't bury someone under a tree when it's planted, or you kill the roots.
Well, they manage. There are people in the graveyard. They're live oaks.
Oh, I was thinking,
Under the tree.
I was thinking under the
It's
roots.
not immediately under the tree, but it's still within reach of the canopy.
Which is
I was thinking more literally.
Yeah, which is huge, absolutely huge.
Your poem is so personal throughout, and then in the end you sort of pull back and retreat into this philosophical idea. My question was when you, that last line, "We're still, despite false memories that may never have existed at all." What was your answer to that question? Did it exist for you? Did it exist for you?
I guess my own thought is it doesn't matter. I love my home. I love New Orleans. I love being there. I love being with my old friends. I love the reality that I knew, false reality or false memory or not. It's a cherished memory and it's part of who I am. But if you ask Dr. Professor Felix Galliano, retired from Ohio University, with more philosophic mood, I'd say probably it's all a fantasy. Probably all a mirage.
I'm wondering if this poem deserves another stanza beyond this one, then, to come back to your assessment, to pull it back into your personal take on it.
But I think that what he says there is true, and you can find it out if you're one of several siblings, and you mention some aspect of your childhood, something about the house or some thing that happened. And at least 3 of them are going to say, that never happened, or I don't remember that, or, and so it wrenches what you really think.
I would agree with that, Patricia.
I see your point, Ruth, but I guess I was content to raise the question rather than provide the answer, because I don't feel like I have any profound answer to that, but I certainly have profound questions.
I know, but it was so personal. I enjoyed all those details so much because it was definitely you, and then all of a sudden you sort of retreat, in the end, emotionally you retreat.
Yeah.
And I know, but
it's his poem.
Consider it. Bigger and bigger and bigger again.
Isn't home
different? You can't go home again. You can't. It's always different.
Yeah.
I mean, I was raised in Texas. You could not pay me enough money to live there anymore.
Yeah.
Well, this is a totally abstract or idealistic thing. Home, the very nature of home, in looking back to. It's something that is not tied to. Well, it's tied to concrete details that are no longer there, but there is an atmosphere, ideological atmosphere.
Patricia says, once you create it and you embellish it, and then you remember what you falsely remembered as real.
But then you go back to where you were raised, to this big white brick house, and they painted it blue.
Or
it's not there.
Or it's not there.
Street is no longer
it's not big, or it's not anything.
Or it's now a Burger King. One of my cases.
But if you keep telling the stories about what it was, then it still is.
No, that's the paradox. That's the wonderful paradox of life.
Yeah, I agree. And your take is as good as any sibling's take.
Just one very light thing. A couple of our friends lived in New Orleans, and his birthday was in July.
Oh, yeah.
And that wall of heat at that time, I was suggesting half birthdays to him. I thought maybe you're probably would.
I tell you, when you hit it, it's like hitting a wall of heat. I mean, I got off the plane and I went, wow, this is unbearable. Of course, you got used to it, but.
When I go back to my grandparents' home, it's no longer there. And it's very well kept, the grounds and so forth, and there were mules in there. But it all looks so small. I mean, there couldn't have been the same land, that where the big house stood. And
Well, it's not there, but it's there in your mind.
Yes.
So it's in that sense eternally there.
I've always admired people who can sort of hang their hat anywhere and call it home. They sort of have that.
Yeah, it's
home is where they land.
Yeah, it's never been a place. It's always been in their spirit. Yeah.
Well, this poem I sort of worked on something that began years ago, and it was when I was in Wendy McVicker's class, along with Felix and some others here, and
years ago.
Years ago.
It started this actually the people from that class.
Wendy, yes,
Wendy. Okay.
So the thing was to start it with a line from some other poem. So this is the first line in this is from William Stafford's poem. Breaking up, where the wind ended and we came down, disheveled and shaken up, off balance to say the least, there began the struggle to stir the consciousness and find a path out of the wreckage. The first years spent in entanglements of vines with an occasional clearing where sun, moon, and stars illumined paths to possible renewal. Seldom was it easy, despite a determined will to get through it somehow. The narcotic of years passing dulled the pain of crushing loss and fractured dreams. Scar tissue formed, and they went on to create new futures.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Certainly different from what you usually.
Yeah, it
No,
really
it's
is.
very, I was about to
Yeah.
say that, it's very different from what you usually produce.
Yeah.
And very nice.
You know, as you were going through it, I was picturing, I don't know what you had in mind, so let me just, I was picturing a parachutist that had fallen into a tree and that the wind ended, or something, like a balloon or something, the wind ended and we came into this tree and we struggled with it and we stayed there in this tree. And that's what I was, but then I realized that's a nice analogy to just life in general, that we drop into this whatever it is and we struggle to make ends meet. It's kind of, I found it fascinating.
That was the end of a marriage.
That's
That's what I thought.
interesting.
Yeah.
And I felt that I was downsized from my job in 2009. And I wrote a lot about it, and that resonated with me from that aspect of getting rid of all that stuff that a whole new life was opening up. And I likened it to unwinding a spool, thread by thread by thread. Yeah, but it's the same feeling that I had when that happened.
I was thinking more of a higher balloon. We then did,
Yeah.
and we came down.
There's a line in a Thomas Merton poem about climbing someone else's walls. You climbed someone else's walls, and now it's time to climb your own, so to speak, or come down from that wall.
Like the narcotic of years
I like that.
By the way, as we're between things, I had a nice note from Joe Rota, who sends his readings to all of you. That has to be remembered. He's on it happily in Texas now, but they're going to Mexico for several weeks. So
Oh, too bad. I'm going to Texas. I'm just hoping.
I thought of him with your footnote.
Oh, I was on Patricia Black footnote.
Well, somebody very nervous, I didn't mention it.
I know you showed great restraint, thank you.
Somebody mentioned that it was his birthday yesterday.
Yes.
It was his
Yeah.
birthday,
Yeah.
yeah. And Cooper Chin
Yeah.
happens to know that for some peculiar reason. I think her birthday corresponds or something.
Huh.
So she's the one who reminded me that it was Joe's birthday. I sent him a greeting. That was the immediate reason that he replied.
Do you know how old he is?
He's
Yes,
a baby
71.
compared to some of us.
He's 71.
Compared to me.
71.
Kathy, you did so
71.
well with that sad poem, reflective. Maybe you ought to try more of those. I don't want to make you sad, but
You're good at
but that was really good. I really liked that.
Night travel. Unavoidable delays and dismal weather had the family late on the homeward road, heading into gathering dark. Rain drumming on the buggy roof and the steady plodding of the horse lulled all the children into slumber. The father, all but succumbing to the late hour and darkness, swayed on the driver's seat beside his dozing wife. The horse moved stolidly beside the silently rushing, flooded river. Sensing something amiss, the father jerked awake, looked frantically into the dark, and realized the horse had stopped, standing patiently in the road in the rain. To mask his fear, he shouted, to mask his fear, he shouted at the horse and slapped the reins sharply against its back, but the horse wouldn't move. At a slash from the buggy whip, the horse hopped forward a short step, jolting the wagon and waking the children not already awake. Swearing, the father stepped down into the muddy road, grabbed the halter strap, tried to haul the horse forward, and realized the bridge was gone. The horse washed away in the flood.
Good horse sense.
Yes.
Is this based on a true story?
Yes, it was my mother and her siblings and parents, and they were going home from somewhere, and she said the kids were all asleep in the buggy, and their dad started yelling and screaming, and the horse jumped, and then they realized that that's what happened. Is that
Oh my God.
the
So
horse?
it was her father, your
Yeah,
mother's
my grandfather. Yeah. But the horse was not about to try to cross that river.
I hope somebody gave him a carrot.
No kidding.
Maybe on the way home. I don't think they had carrots with them. I don't know. That wasn't part of the story.
And an apple.
That is such a wonderful story.
Yeah, it's very gripping. I mean,
Yeah.
you capture your audience very quickly.
Yeah. I have to admit, when it started, I thought, can I stand it if this is one of those Amish buggies that gets creamed by some fast-moving automobile, you know?
No, this was just back before there were very many fast-moving automobiles.
Yeah. This is, have you ever heard the expression that animals are angels with fur?
No.
Have you heard that?
No, it's neat.
It is, yeah.
Not my cat.
He's been telling me this guy.
On the other end, that one.
Damned cat.
Well, I suppose you have angels with fur, you can have devils with fur.
I just can imagine this story got passed down so many times. It's such a remarkable story. I mean, they could have gone to their deaths.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that is a traditional saying, isn't it? That's good horse sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it comes from something like that. some
Yes,
story like that.
yes.
You know, but my grandpa he was probably asleep himself and realized something's wrong, and what was wrong was the buggy had stopped.
Yeah.
And so then he had
It had
stupid
been
horse.
the horse's fault rather than anyone else.
Just because we're asleep doesn't mean a horse should be. And I think to mask his own fear is why he was shouting and carrying on. And
My great-grandfather had a story where they took the sleigh into town because it snowed. And while they were there, the snow melted. So they had to drag the horses.
Oh,
no.
And think about that today, but I would imagine that was fairly common at one time where,
Yeah.
the snow melted while you were doing your Saturday shopping and there's no snow left.
Life was hard.
Well, father's always determined to have his way. That's the role of the father. I guess that's experience
You
speaking.
will do it.
I think we've got more than enough here.
I always thought that, but you're the first person who really said that.
or the first male. I think a lot of women have said that.
Probably, you're right.
I have a second poem which I think I should hold, seeing how time goes and whatever, for the end, if available. Everybody has an uncomfortable coat on?
Yeah.
Has a footnote. I was not born black. Is it possible that I wish I had been? Injustice and ignorance is how I see the world. Too many people I see hunt for someone to hate, to blame. They take pleasure in making jokes about the weak, the victimized, the ones they would like to feel and do better than. I feel rage, not just hate. It stands between me and the world. A human world stretching over an American history of white over black. Yes, occasionally I wish I had been born black. I would have no reason to doubt the wisdom, the propriety of my rage. I would not be an unwilling contributor to institutional racism and would do battle against the offenders of all stripes. Yet my rage would not lessen the suffering of all blacks. It would drain off no portion of the hurt from any victimized individual. As a black, I would be told, says Coates, to be twice as good, which means I accept half as much. My rage, I feel, makes me a not very likable person to those who would like to see me with their eyes. I hope for peace and gentle acceptance of one for another.
Wow.
Good for you. Good for you.
Occasionally I have that feeling and I just wonder about it, so I explored it a little bit.
Yeah.
This is Coates, you know.
Yeah.
He's
Did you
got
read his,
tremendous press.
wasn't he that wrote the letter to my son in the
That's
Atlantic
it.
magazine?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a short version of
Yeah.
Oh,
this.
yeah, I saw that.
That was
Yeah.
pretty
That's
incredible.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
Is Coates black?
mhm,
Could I see that, please?
surely.
When you get
This isn't Shirley, this is
He was inspired by The Fire Last Time, James Baldwin's short book, which also begins with a letter to his son.
Yeah.
And
Letter from a native son to his parents, but
Well, just-
James Baldwin.
Baldwin's Fire Next Time begins with this letter to his lengthy letter to his son, and that's the entire form that this book takes. And anyway, I was motivated to reread Baldwin, and then this as well. That didn't exactly make the poem, but that was going on as I was working on the poem. That the press seems to want to avoid, which has occurred to me and occurred to Coates and so on, is that all this blame of police forces and body cameras and all that stuff is concealing the fact that a majority of the population stands behind these cops and what they are doing in their brutality and racism. They are from our population and they are supported. They well know they are supported, even though they may not say it to themselves in that many words. It is there in their upbringing. It's back at their kitchen table, whatever, to support them in what they're doing. It's
Enlarged by the police academy training.
police academies are noble. I once helped run a police academy way back in another career long ago. And they take noble young men who wish to be good public servants and put them into a situation which after a couple of years turns them into the cop that
That's what I'm saying. Is that
we deride. Right.
I saw a video on Facebook yesterday from, there was a black woman that was taking up this issue, but she was saying, you can't just say it's all the police on, this Black Lives Matter and all that sort of thing. She said that she has several children and one of them is in jail, and she said it's because I had told him that I will not, if you get yourself into trouble, I'm not going to try to bail you out. And she said, we have to start taking responsibility. It's blacks killing blacks that is more of a problem than cops killing blacks. And she was citing statistics about in Chicago, there were so many black people killed, and they were killed by blacks.
Well, that's an out.
Poverty,
I think
That's a majoritarian out to concentrate on that. That is a
Well,
majoritarian
I
out.
think it's worth
It's a,
listening to.
yeah, but look
Because
at the
she's thinking-
situation in which they live. Look at the history of code enforcement in this country. Look at the history of building codes and
But look
zoning,
at you saying, if
Look-
I were black, and she is black.
right?
And I think there's a strong difference there. You're idealizing how I would be if I were on the oppressed people, I wouldn't take it, I'd do, well, she's saying we've got to stop taking it from ourselves as well as from other people.
Yeah, yeah, and, well, if you read this, you will get a new look on some of this business, because not every black person has the same feelings.
Mhm.
And,
Every white person.
and they don't refer to white person, they refer to people who think they're white, or people who present themselves as white. You know, I mean, what does white mean? I mentioned White Over Black, which is a well-known book, which describes the history of black situations in America from its very founding, you know.
Well, and I've never been able to understand why people say that Barack Obama is black. He's only half black. They don't ever talk about the other half of him. And, I think
They can't see that they have a,
that's a failing, but we know it's there.
Well,
they don't.
But that's I think that's a failing on the part of white people, that we don't accept the white aspect of biracial children.
in the
Well,
South, they
somewhere-
used to have terms like octoroon, right? And if you are octoroon, that's good enough, you don't qualify.
Someplace there was, maybe some state ruled that any black blood
One
means
drop of black blood.
sure.
is
So
what
showboat.
Sure.
And so, I don't think that the way they're treated is the way they, being black people, is the way they should be treated. But
It's
on the
a
other hand, I
white
don't
people's
think-
problem. It's not a black people's problem. It's the white people who do not give jobs to, who do not allow mortgages to, et cetera, et cetera, et
Well,
cetera.
It can be a black problem too when you've got blacks who don't want the blacker blacks to be their
Yeah, well,
daughter's husband.
they think they're white, maybe, I mean, everyone is not confronting the
It's relative.
problem in the same way.
Right, exactly.
And you know
But,
what we're doing right here?
yeah.
We're doing the same thing you're talking about. Because we don't treat each other as people, never mind what the color of their skin.
That's right.
That's the problem.
Well,
We've got this mask or whatever, I don't know. I grew up with this. And it is that you define somebody by their color
Yeah.
instead of by their persona.
and
And
But I think that works the other way too. I think that blacks assume things about me because of my color. They assume negative things about me, about
Sure.
my attitude,
Darn
how
right.
I'm going to treat them without trying to find out first. They just assume that I'm going to do this, that, or the other.
Don't
And,
you think
um,
that's true with anything, though?
Yeah.
You can take anything.
Yeah.
What do young people think about you? What do people that older think? What do people from West Virginia think about you, or
People
Michigan?
with
It's-
disabilities.
That's all, it's,
Yeah, well, and I have worked on two different papers. One written by a Japanese student who was, no, she was Chinese, studying the problems that Chinese American students face in American schools. where people assume things of them. They're supposed to be the bright kids. You know, the Chinese kids or Asian kids are the bright ones. It's a mask, you know, it's an image that they have to live up to. And their parents are trying to, they sort of feel pushed into pushing their kids. And then I've been working with a number of Saudis who are writing papers about disabled people particularly in the Saudi schools, but mainstreaming disabled kids. And it's interesting that
all kinds of groups are
Yeah.
bullied and so forth, but it's not comparable to the race problem. And one thing that's very little discussed is the fact that race is an artificial concept. It doesn't exist.
Right.
There is no genetic, no physical evidence of race. So why is it created? Well, it's created because this nation is founded on wealth created by slavery and other kinds of oppression, and that they find ways of bringing this story right up to date.
And it's also kin selection.
Yeah,
It's also what?
kin selection. But genetically, we are not. There is such thing as race. We are all one grand panoply of colors, but classification is part of our genetic heritage. It is coded within our genes, probably.
Why do we have federal forms that say check your race? You know, I mean, that shouldn't exist because it's not real. You know, the thing is, we're all in the same boat. We don't realize that. We want to keep some people in, in slavery or so forth. And these books, these two letters to their son, are the kinds of things that white people don't get into with their children. But this is all about what you do when you encounter a white person, how you must act. You know, they want you to be nice, which means they're going to give you half of what anyone else would get, you know. And, there's famous scene, he talks about when he and his son were watching on television, his son stayed up late to see what happened to the cop in Ferguson, and at 11 o'clock or something, the news came on, and that there were no charges against the white cop, and the son said, "I've got to go." And he went in his room and closed his door, and his father hears sobbing. The kid is in there sobbing.
Oh,
From up above in the Bodhi tree, my love built me a tree house high up off the ground with a 360-degree green surround and a telescope to look for hope. In my house there lived a small brown mouse who ate peanut M&M candy. Her name was Miss Tandy. She slept in the tree hole, claimed she was an old soul. My cat Tigman wanted to eat her, thought she'd make a tasty tidbit, not being one for higher thought or Brit Lit. He bought her M&Ms and watched her eat them. It was the perfect place to meditate, a quiet, if potentially deadly spot. But we take our chances, don't we, with an awful lot. Best to blank out from time to time than be a worry lout. Anyway, the story never goes the way you think it might. Miss Tandy and Tigman never did exactly have a fight. Totally sugar crazed that mouse was soused. One muscled day she charged the cat like fierce Boadicea. One sharp toe bite sent him airborne off the ledge. Luckily, he survived by landing in the hedge. My belief confirmed that in the end, life is good the way it bends.